Hi everyone. Well, yesterday somebody sent me a letter from Peter Williams, which was dated the 18th of June 2024, so it's roughly a month old. And it's worth talking about this because this letter actually illustrates what I was talking about in yesterday's video about treaty ignorance is costing the country millions and costing all of us billions of dollars because people don't know the treaty. And so let's read through this together. It says, "Dear friend, Jordan has given me a full update on our efforts to knock undemocratic co-governance on the head once and for all." Good. That's fantastic that the Taxpayers Union are doing this. While the new government is talking, and he's made that italics to say that they're all talk and no do, a tougher line on these issues than the last one. So far, they're not delivering. So what he's saying here is that National is just not delivering on getting rid of co-governance and the MAORIfication of New Zealand. National, he says in particular, are still reluctant to walk the talk. Now, I've said this all along, and that I've said that it's like a marriage, and New Zealand First and ACT are the willing partners in the marriage, but National is very reluctant. They're the unwilling marriage partner in this coalition. They do not want to stop co-governance. They do not want to stop MAORIfication. In fact, they're accelerating it. So Peter says tackling this challenge issue head on is exactly what New Zealanders elected them to do. So he's saying that in the last election, the reason that National ACT and New Zealand First were put in government and the others were kicked out was because we wanted an end to undemocratic co-governance and an end to undemocratic MAORIfication. He says, let's do a quick recap. You'll recall the email some weeks ago in relation to Timana Otiwai and its implications on fresh water, but here's a quick recap. So he's talking about this thing called Timana Otiwai, and that was a key part of Three Waters. So he's recapping here and he says, it is becoming clear the new government is continuing down Labour's path of undemocratic and costly co-governance due to pressure from bureaucracy who are using incorrect, misinterpreted legal advice to force co-governance on our democracy. I disagree with that, for one thing, because I say it's not bureaucracy that's doing this. Timana Otiwai is basically the Labour government's policy of making sure that iwi have a say in all freshwater legislation, all freshwater resource consents, everything to do with water, that iwi have input into that. Now, I don't believe that it's bureaucracy doing that. They may well be involved and they would be involved, but ultimately politicians can stop all this with a signature, with a pen, instantly. They have the power to tell bureaucrats what to do, but they're not doing it. And why aren't they doing it? Well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I believe that at the top of the tree is Chris Luxon, and I believe that he is responsible, and Potaka, the two of them in the National Party, they are responsible for pushing co-governance and pushing MAORIfication, and they are telling bureaucrats to continue with the Labour policy to do with co-governance and Te Mana Otiwai. Te Mana Otiwai, as I've said, is just a Maori word for the mana of the water, or the Maori consider water to be spiritual, and therefore they say through the treaty they have some special take on the water in New Zealand and must be given a say, and it's an absolute rort. You know what, I'd also mention one thing about the courts here, which I talked about in my last video, is that the courts have been infiltrated by activists, or have lobbied the government to put in place activist judges, and our judiciary is at the moment severely compromised. So decisions that these courts make and the judgments they come up with must be taken with a grain of salt, because honestly, they have become activist strongholds, the courts in New Zealand. The government, he says in the next statement, the government looks set to keep co-governance of freshwater rivers, lakes, and rules for agriculture runoff will be subject to Te Mana Otiwai. That's literally meaning the mana of the water, or the spirituality of the water. Can you imagine anything so ridiculous? This is just hocus pocus, and we're being all sucked into it, and Maori are making it up to make money. They had no mana of the water understanding pre-1840. This is a new modern invention to screw the country over to get money, through local councils over to get money. It's a scam. There has been some progress in this area, see further down this email, but it's a halfway solution. So he's saying that National is kind of like pegging it back a little bit, but actually they're not doing anything. We understand that the reason the new government has not repealed David Parker's unworkable freshwater national policy statement is because ministers have been advised that changing the race-based and impossibly high water standards cannot be done without iwi consent, which is exactly what the Labour government wanted. They wanted iwi to have a full say in all freshwater matters in this country, and that's why they formulated that freshwater national policy statement. But then again, hang on a minute, I thought Parliament was supreme and that they could overrule any court ruling or any previous government's legislation or statute. So what's going on here? I'll tell you what's going on. Chris Luxon is overruling everything. He's keeping co-governance going. Him and Potaka are working flat out on these issues to progress everything. We've got a very dangerous guy in our parliament, two of them actually, in national. Under David Parker's national policy statement on freshwater, local council plans must allow tangata whenua, that's Maori, why don't they use that word, to be actively involved in decision-making process relating to Maori freshwater values, as defined by relevant tangata whenua. In other words, why did Peter put that in bold and underline it? Because they can make it up as they go along from council to council. It's a scam. This is a scam. Regional councils must, quote, work with tangata whenua to investigate the use of mechanisms such as transfers or delegations of power and joint management agreements. What does that mean? It means that Maori are getting their tentacles into co-governance of all councils at all levels. They start with water, it'll be something else, it'll be building, and then it'll be natural resources like forests and fishing areas, and then it'll be dock estates. And before you know it, they would have taken over. These people do not realize how dangerous all this is. So let's keep going down here. The social and economic well-being of communities who collect and use water must come second to whatever local iwi say upholds the Te Mana o Te Wai. So they're saying, it doesn't matter about what it's going to cost communities. Giving Maori a say is going to burn up a lot of money for no reason other than to fill the pockets of Maori. What do I mean? Well, councils have limited funds. The money gifted to Maori for hocus pocus to further Maori religion could have gone into roads or parks or footpaths or worthwhile community initiatives. What happens next? Rates go up. What happens next? Ratepayers don't have the spare cash to support local businesses. They stop spending and on it goes. And it all started because MPs and staff in local councils did not know the treaty. That's the root of it, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, so hang on. All roads lead back to the infamous Three Waters advice, which the public has still not seen. What does he mean by that? He's going to go on and explain that. What the Taxpayers Union is doing on your behalf. Jordan wrote to Attorney General Judith Collins urging her to waive privilege and release the legal advice given to Nanaia Mahuta, but apparently says the Three Waters style co-governance is required under the treaty. Stop right there. So here's Article 1 from the treaty. The chiefs of the Confederation of United Tribes and the other chiefs who have not joined the Confederation cede to the Queen of England forever the entire sovereignty of their country. Now, that is so clear, it's absolutely bulletproof. There's no loopholes, there's no question marks. If you signed off on that, you ceded sovereignty to the British. The key question is, what does cede mean? It means to give up or to give somebody control. Look at that. That's what it means. Sovereignty means government or complete power to govern a country, not partial power. But complete power to what? To govern a country. That means to manage all the resources and all the people of a country. That's what we have today. That is what government means. Does this article teach, instruct, convey the idea that Maori would be self-determining, having their own government, or that the Queen entered into a partnership with Maori? Or that Maori had some special authority, some special right to own the water in this country? Absolutely nothing in there. Because the complete power to govern a country includes water and all the resources of a country. So this is bulletproof. Why doesn't Peter Williams refer to the treaty itself? Why doesn't the Taxpayers Union refer to the treaty itself? Why don't MPs? You know what? Because they don't know. That's what it's about. And this is what's costing us billions of dollars, because they're not going back to the source. This is where the problems are coming from. Nobody is going back to the actual treaty, the actual words of the treaty. That's the problem. All the resources of this country, everything, the water, the oceans, the mountains, the rivers, the lakes, every single natural resource in this country was given to the British for their management, other than privately owned property. Now that's important, because the treaty only guaranteed to Maori and everybody else living in New Zealand the ownership and protection of their private property. So what does Article 2 of the treaty actually say? Well, here it is. The Queen confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and the tribes and to all the people of New Zealand the possession of their lands, dwellings and all their property. What did that mean? It meant that Maori were only going to be guaranteed the ownership of their property, that is their past sites, the land on which those past sites sat, the houses on those past sites, and any chattels they had, basically house and contents. And it meant that any fishing areas that they had around the coast, and Maori did have little fishing areas, and they divided up the coast into little areas where they would fish, and and they marked them off with wooden stakes to say, this is my fish, this is my beach, or this is my fishing area. And so that is all the British were were guaranteeing and wanting to, or promising to protect. And when in 1840 Maori ceded sovereignty, the first job that the British had to do was find out where the boundaries were which each tribe had for their land, their forests and their fisheries and everything else, and then actually put a title on that land, because the British introduced the British system of titles to this country, where a piece of land would be surveyed, a title would be issued, and then it would be registered with the titles office. We have LINZ, Land Information New Zealand, which is exactly the same thing right now in this country. That is all they were promised. Now, this gets really interesting. So there's absolutely nothing in the treaty about the government having to honour some sort of Te Mana o Te Wai that Maori are putting forth. There's nothing in the treaty about this, absolutely not. I mean, if they had water, if Maori had water running through their piece of private land, then that was theirs to do what they wanted with it. Just like a farmer does today. He has a creek or a river going through his property. His cattle can, or his sheep or whatever he wants, can go down to that river and that creek, and they can drink from it, and there's no problem with that. Absolutely no problem. That is all the British were promising to Maori in the treaty and everybody else. It's the same today. If a farmer has a creek or a river or a pond or something going through his on his property, he can do whatever he wants with it within the bounds and the laws of the local council, but it has nothing to do with Maori at all. So let's keep reading. If we can slay that dragon, and we definitely can slay that dragon, it becomes very difficult to justify the continued existence of any form of undemocratic co-governance. Now, what amazes me as we read through this letter is that the Taxpayers Union makes no reference to the actual treaty, and that's a problem, because remember yesterday I said that the ignorance about the treaty with MPs is costing us billions of dollars, and it's a major problem. Well, it's also a major problem, it seems, with the Taxpayers Union and also with local councils, because they don't actually say or show in the treaty where they justify this from the treaty. They don't actually talk about the treaty. They talk about it in the third person. The treaty says this or the treaty says that, but they don't actually show where in the treaty it says this and it says that. See the difference? Sure, the activists bang on about TINO, RANGATIRATANGA, Kawanatanga and Taonga. Those are the big three they go on about. But really, these can easily be shot down once we come to know the treaty. You know what? We're on very, very solid ground when we engage with the activists on the actual meaning of the words of the treaty. Because the reality is that the actual treaty, not the treaty the activists have bent and contorted out of shape, is very easy to understand and is not ambiguous. That's the way the British wanted it in 1840. Alright, I think that's enough for today. But what I want you to get from this is that everybody is referring to the treaty and such about the treaty and this and that about the treaty, but nobody actually refers to the actual treaty. And if we did, we'd be on very solid ground, because none of what they say, these activists and these councils and these politicians say, is actually justified in the actual treaty. You see? Now, tomorrow I'm going to go into more of this, and it gets infinitely more interesting as we work through this letter, because it's a really good letter from Peter Williams. Alright, see you tomorrow. Please share this video with everyone everywhere. The mainstream media should be reporting on the issues I am raising in these videos, but they're not. Why aren't they? Well, they're corrupt. Why are they corrupt? They are collaborating with Maori activists, there's no doubt about that. In the final analysis, the people of New Zealand, that's us, have ultimate power, not the politicians. Did you know that? The people can kick out the people in power and they can put them into power. How are we going to do that? Well, awareness is the key to change. If enough people in New Zealand become aware of the issues I am raising, we can save this beautiful country. So share these videos everywhere so that come the next election, we can vote the right people in and kick out the people who are destroying New Zealand.